Persona 3 Reload was a marathon of a game. When I first started playing, I knew it would be long, but I assumed it was long for the wrong reasons. When I think of games I've put 60 plus hours of time into, I usually look back on those games fondly with memories of great gameplay, replayability, and sometimes fantastic stories. If a game doesn't meet that criteria within an arbitrary time frame, then I tend to drop it, and who can blame me? There's so many great games out there I can play. That said, I don't think Persona 3 Reload has great gameplay, replayability, or story. Yet I still did play it to completion, docking roughly 80 hours, and believe I saw just about everything that this game had to offer. Before we get into my reasons behind this, I want to give you the perspective I had prior to playing. I watched a certain someone play Persona 5 a long time ago. This certain someone was also the same person that inspired me to make this channel you're watching right now. As to who that was, I'll leave you guessing. Since it was in an unedited VOD format, I got to experience the highs and lows of the game just as the person playing did, and because of that, I eventually stopped watching. As a viewer, I hated the dungeon crawling segment since the plot would very slowly move forward and all I wanted to see was the slice of life aspect of the game. So, going into Persona 3 Reload, I expected grindy turn-based combat, a mediocre story with cheesy anime writing, a strange but likable cast of main and side characters, and some great music and aesthetic. This section will be spoiler free and I'll warn you properly when it's your time to go. Without going into much detail on the story, I'll start by saying the introduction is pretty slow, which I can't say I minded very much, though it does take too long to open up. It'll be a couple of hours until the tutorial is completely over once you get started. You can also see that while there is an objective visual improvement from the original game, I feel like it still doesn't look great. I'm no artist, so I'll try to keep this brief. The environments and characters look very low in detail. I'm not looking for something jaw-dropping like Red Dead Redemption, Helldivers, or Dragon's Dogma 2. In fact, this could be intentional on the part of the developers. They did it in an effort to preserve the look of the original's art design, type of thing. Regardless of if that was the case or not, this doesn't stop the game from looking flat most of the time. Aside from visuals, this is probably one of the most unique sounding games I've ever played. Both menu feedback, which you'll be flipping through a lot, and music are top notch. Now to get into the real meat and potatoes, the gameplay. Since I don't like turn-based combat, I'm about to make like an addict and get cracking. Keeping story details short, you're eventually attacked by shadows and are introduced to the game's combat system. By blowing your brains out with an evoker, you can summon a persona, and as the game continues, you acquire new ones that you have a set number of. This number will increase as you level up. Each persona has strengths and weaknesses. Think Pokemon for example. There are personas that can deal slash, bash, pierce, fire, ice, lightning, wind, light, dark, and a few more that aren't as important. And each persona can also be susceptible to each of those affinities. Hitting a weakness knocks an enemy down. Then you can use an all-out attack allowing you to dish out free damage. It isn't until shifting is introduced that this really becomes viable. Shifting is when you hit an enemy's weakness or land a critical, and it allows you to swap between your other party members to access their unique personas. So, your bread and butter will be hitting one enemy's weakness, then shifting to another party member to hit another enemy's weakness until all enemies are knocked down, allowing you to use an all-out attack. During a lot of boss fights though, this won't be viable since bosses won't have weaknesses. That raises the question, how do you defeat enemies without any weaknesses? Aside from nerfing the enemy and buffing yourself, it boils down to an exhilarating battle of attrition. Yippee. To be fair, I don't think every enemy in the game should be weak to an affinity, but the battle of attrition style of gameplay wasn't satisfying for me either, especially in the late game when enemy HP pools can be quite large. This becomes an annoying issue when you come across mini-bosses in the dungeons that don't have any weaknesses, so you're required to use all of your SP, or mana, to kill them. I guess if you're stretching you can set a goal for yourself to use as little SP as possible, but it doesn't really change the fact that it just feels like a frustrating time sink. And since Reload encourages you to continue exploring with its Arcana Burst system, it can at times feel counterintuitive. I should probably explain what Arcana Burst is though, for those that don't know. After defeating enemies you get to choose your reward. This is called Shuffle Time. During this, Arcana cards appear and you can increase the odds of this happening if you end the fight with an all-out attack. Collecting a certain number of Arcana cards will grant you a Arcana Burst. This will upgrade all the basic reward cards such as XP boost and gain money. So with that in mind, my goal for every time I entered the dungeon was to acquire an Arcana Burst, so that when I came back to the dungeon, all the minor cards would give me increased benefits and would allow me to snowball into gaining more XP and money. So maybe you can somewhat understand why having these mini boss encounters drain you of your time and SP, which you can only restore through consumables or rare clock thingies that require a hefty total of 7 Twilight Fragments, can really frustrate me. Though, there is one more way to restore your party's SP. Later on, after progressing some time past the halfway point in the game, the navigator of your group can restore your party's SP using their Theurgy, which is essentially just an ultimate move. However, their Theurgy is just to buff you, so the buff can be somewhat random. I say somewhat because it does seem to me that the Theurgy will try to give you whatever is most needed in the battle you're currently fighting. Since whenever I was low on HP and SP, and used their ability, they would restore my HP and SP. Otherwise, I believe their other two buffs are increasing your team's attack, defense, and agility altogether, or doubling your next magic ability, which for the team I was running was a really bad one to get since I only had 2.5 magic casting party members, including myself. Party member stats differ among them, and you can have 3 active members, making the total party a total of 4, including yourself, not including the navigator, which is always present. I'm not going to go over everyone, but my setup was 2.5 casters and 1 tank. I say 2.5 because one of them was essentially dedicated to healing and only healing. Since I was playing on hard difficulty, whenever I was attacked by an enemy I would need to heal almost every turn. Fortunately, I didn't mind this much since when that character healed, their Theurgy meter would increase substantially and the cost for them to heal and cure others of their status ailments was halved. Because of all that, they remained in my party for the entire run through of the game, and even had the highest honor of being the character I romanced. The other caster is regulated to being a damage dealer with the occasional healing or resurrection spell when needed, and the tank would serve as a support by buffing my party's offense and defense stats, then through their Theurgy would deal continuous damage to the enemy, which at times would make me feral, and I have to have a short rant about it. Aegis's Theurgy or Gia mode, yes she's a robot, don't worry about it, increases her base stats and allows her to attack the enemy for a few turns after dealing heavy damage to all enemies. During these turns, you won't be able to control which attack she uses, but she will attack. So if the enemy would outright block bash damage and Aegis used a bash ability, then the damage would be nulled, and Aegis would sometimes do the same move over and over and over again, defeating the entire purpose of the Theurgy. This happened pretty rarely, but Aegis wasn't in my party till later in the game, but whenever it did occur, the voices would get louder and none of us want that. Ordinarily, I would consider replacing her with another caster since I felt that killing enemies took too long sometimes and it would be more efficient to kill them faster to conserve SP. However, Reload has a rather strange leveling system. Each character levels up independently. If a character is not included in a fight, and if a party member is dead at the end of a battle, they won't receive XP, leading to an eventual XP gap between you and your non-included party members. Initially, my thought was to rotate party members frequently to keep them all roughly at the same level. If someone runs out of SP, then I can just use the next teleporter I see to return to the hub and swap them out for another one. This thought was short-lived though when the game introduced these time savers. I don't know what they're called officially. They appear occasionally after using a clock that restores your HP and SP and allows you to level up non-active party members. The lower level they are, the higher level they'll be next time they win a battle. Yet that still was not enough incentive for me to swap out my current party members. Maybe it was because I was playing on hard mode that my defense-oriented team was the most viable. I'm not really sure, to be honest. I just know that whenever I would try to experiment that I would default back to this setup for one reason or another. Let's talk about the Slice of Life segments now, and about remakes and remasters. Almost every day can be broken down into 2 parts, day and night. Some people and activities can be interacted with at certain times of the day, and most of them will be during the daytime, until later on in the game when you can interact with your party members in meaningful ways, which I'll touch upon later. My personal recommendation is to interact with as many people as possible. If someone is available, go and speak to them. I did not do this initially. I was set more on leveling up my own social stats, thinking that they would provide something useful and that it would take a long amount of time to level up one of them since there's no way to keep track of where you're at. And if I could get it out of the way early on, then I could focus on socializing with everyone to build their social ranks in the late game. what this led to was me being max level earlier than what the game probably wanted me to be. In the latter half of the game, once you interact with your other party members outside of just dungeon crawling, you're rewarded with social stats instead of just increasing their social links, save for female party members which have their own social links. For me, interacting with them was available after I had reached max level, and I'm going to assume that it's possible I had reached a certain date that interacting with them was now possible. So, every time I hung out with a male party member, the reward would be an increase in a social stat I had already maxed out. There's no conversion rate or alternative reward either. I just had to sit there with dismay each and every time this happened. At least I enjoyed hanging out with each character and trying to get to know them a little more, so it's not the end of the world or anything. Shout out to Amada and Sonata. There's also recurring activities such as gardening, cooking, and reading with them. These can give your companions characteristics, basically a passive boost that synergizes with their corresponding combat ability. These little hobbies spent with each member is a good way to flesh each of them out. In fact, most of my favorite moments in Reload were during these small, insignificant conversations where their personalities begin to shine. Instead of cheesy, "we'll do whatever it takes," or "I'm by your side no matter what comes our way," these nonchalant instances provide what I think to be the best writing that the game has to offer. I could not respect any of the antagonists at all simply because of how terribly they were written. It truly boggles my mind. And yes, this could very well be a symptom of the original release. In an effort to remain faithful to the original piece of work, Atlus, the studio that developed Persona, may have thought changing the dialogue would divert too far from the original source material, and that maybe it would have upset fans of the first game. It's also worth mentioning that it could very well be a product of its time. I'm not old enough to know what public sentiment was like when it came to anime, especially in Japan, but if I had to guess, it may be because anime was still in its adolescence and stories like the one seen in this game were somewhat common. In retrospect, this could be a homage to that era, and if it is, then I do respect that, but it doesn't mean I enjoy it. Even though it would be a very large undertaking and a large amount of the story would have to be changed, I still believe a huge opportunity was missed when they decided not to touch it, and to me, there are glimpses of good writing which makes it all the more frustrating. There's a culture festival that the school holds. Each class gets to decide what to do, but it's ultimately cancelled due to a hurricane that hits Japan. This was a bummer, and I was looking forward to it along with the other characters, but that disappointment was short-lived. When it's announced that it's cancelled, you and your classmates have to take your decorations down, and this remains a highlight of the game for me. Seeing side characters, which were introduced as an NPC that you would interact with strictly for pursuing their social link status, mingling with other characters was somehow amazing to me. It helped the world feel a lot more alive than having each character feel so isolated. Ideally, each side character would be affected in one way or another by whatever the main conflict is, and have to approach the game situation differently from other characters. Because in this game, not a single side character cares that apathy syndrome is spreading. Not every character should be tied in some manner, but I do think having at least some characters be affected would add more stakes to the main quest. I look very forward to seeing how Atlus approaches this in future Persona games 4, 5, and the eventual 6. I really hope none of you who have played the next games just thought, "oh no," in response to that last sentence, and that this sentence I'm currently reading aged like milk and not cheese. Writing aside, I do like all of the party members, simple as some of them are. Junpei is the average bro character who struggles with his place in the world. Yukari is the mild-mannered popular girl. Mitsuru is the ignorant rich girl. Sonata, the upbeat boxer who really wants to get stronger. Fuka, the quiet and shy navigator of this game. Sonata, the child who should really not be on the team. Aragaki, the brooding edgelord. And Aigis, the robot who slowly but surely learns what it means to be human. And Kuromaru, a dog that should really be voice acted by an actual dog. There's also Ikutsuki, who is the chairman of SEAS, the name of your task force, who has a sort of dad energy to him, but he's not a party member. There is a little more that goes into each character beyond these small summaries, but that's what I think of them first and foremost when recalling them. As I go into the story, most, but not all of these characters are fleshed out at least a little bit. I'm going to officially go into major spoiler territory now. I'll be going over most of it in chronological order, and I'll try to keep the date visible in the top right hand corner if you wonder when some events take place. I also won't be going over every single story beat and will be skipping the things I don't think are worth mentioning. If you want to know everything there is to know, then I do recommend playing the game for yourself. as this video was made with the concern that you may play this game if you haven't already. This game is also on Xbox Game Pass, which is how I played it. Figured that was worth mentioning. If you do want to hear about every story beat that happens, then you can also simply watch another video. I guess I'll allow that. Ikutsuki determines that scaling Tartarus, the school-turned labyrinth full of shadows, and more importantly defeating the Arcana shadows that appear during a full moon, will stop the spread of apathy syndrome, a disease where people lose the will to live and become immobile and unresponsive, and will put an end to the Dark Hour. I say, more importantly, because the story doesn't really depend on you scaling Tartarus until later on in the game when it becomes more relevant. This isn't a guide, but I want to be clear that as the game goes on, you will probably want to scale it anyways to get all the rewards for doing so. Anyways, after defeating the Arcana shadows on full moons, you may notice apathy syndrome does sort of wane, but only for a short period of time before another wave of it hits and the next full moon approaches. I think it's easy to notice how each wave progressively gets stronger too. It serves as your first hint that something is wrong with your plan. Along the way, you meet Strega, another group of 3 persona users that don't want the Dark Hour to go away, since they'll lose the ability to use their personas, therefore losing power. I hated Strega. Every time they appeared on screen, I sighed. I found them terribly generic and uninteresting. The main antagonist, Takaya Sakaki, was just the worst. I'll let some of his dialogue speak for itself.
We are known to some as Strega. Now then, we've been keeping an eye on your activities for some time. From what we hear, you've undertaken a righteous battle to save the world. Unfortunately, we've come here tonight to put an end to that.
The other 2 characters serve as his henchmen, with one of them getting far more development than the other. I won't ever mention these 2 characters though, because neither of them are relevant to the overall story at hand. Later on, Amada, who should really not be on the team, and Aragaki will arrange a meeting between the 2 of them. Over the course of the story, you learn that Aragaki used to be a member of SEES with just Sanada and Mitsuru back in the day, lost control of his persona and ended up killing Amada's mother in the accident. Since then, he's been taking medicine to make sure he doesn't lose control again, and also because the medicine has lethal side effects so that he can slowly commit suicide. Amada tells Aragaki that he arranged this meeting to kill Aragaki for killing his mother. Aragaki knew this was the purpose of the meeting and allowed it to happen. However, the 2 are interrupted by Takaya, who says he wants to kill SEES' group navigator to prevent them from locating any more Arcana shadows, a pretty decent idea actually. Takaya reveals to Amada that Aragaki will die relatively soon anyways because of the suppressants they've been providing him. Says he'll kill them both in an act of mercy, and then he shoots Aragaki after his sad attempt to attack Takaya. Amada becomes upset over this new information because he realizes Aragaki is eventually going to die anyway. I hate this plot point. Everyone is eventually going to die. I can't help but feel like this shouldn't really change anything for Amada and that he should just still want to kill Aragaki, but whatever. Amada then announces that he is SEES navigator in an effort to spare Aragaki. Takaya shoots at Amada when suddenly Aragaki tanks the shot for him, dealing a lethal blow. Just before your group arrives, Takaya flees the scene and you get to hear Aragaki's last words. What follows afterwards is a somber beat in the story where things slow down as everyone processes Aragaki's death, and it's handled pretty well. I am glad that the story gives the player time to breathe after this and isn't thrusted into more combat or story beats. Everyone needs some time to process this event, and if that time wasn't given, then I probably would have stopped caring about the story altogether. Speaking of time, there aren't many games that come to mind that take time into consideration where it comes to gameplay and story, and I'm glad this game has a good approach to it. As each full moon approaches, you do feel a sense of urgency to prepare for it since most of the Arcana shadows aren't easy to deal with. That said, the game doesn't have a whole lot of time before having to face the next Arcana shadows. Once you finally defeated all the shadows, Pharaohs... Oh god, I forgot to mention Pharaohs. Pharaohs is a boy in striped pajamas that appears in your room only during the dark hour. Sometimes he shows up, sometimes he doesn't. When he does, he usually warns you about the upcoming full moon. I just didn't bring him up until now because he never appears or does anything outside of this. He's chill though. As he shows up, you build a social link with him too, the Death Arcana. As I was playing, I thought that maybe he was the player character. With Aigis seemingly being from the future, my theory for how we got our powers and were experiencing these weird visits served as some hints that time travel was at play. That would explain why he and the player character look similar. It's some form of himself from the future. So, the story would kind of be like 13 Sentinels. I won't elaborate on that if you don't know what that is. Anyways, now that all the major Arcana shadows have disappeared, so has the Dark Hour. Pharos, warning you beforehand that he would disappear along with it, visits you for one last time during the day. This seems insignificant, but tuck this plot point away in your brain pan for now. After another normal day at school, you attend a party hosted by Mitsuru to celebrate the end of the Dark Hour. Everyone is here, including Mitsuru's father, but there's 2 people missing and never show up. Towards the end of the party, the Dark Hour arrives with a bell coming from Tartarus. In a state of confusion, Seize sets out to see what the commotion is about. It probably won't come to many people's surprise that they run into Ikutsuki and a reprogrammed Aegis. Ikutsuki then gives an exposition dump explaining that he was a researcher that experimented on the shadows 10 years ago in order to harvest their power, and that the Dark Hour and Tartarus were the result of that. He says that having your group going around killing the Arcana shadows was freeing them instead, reuniting them into one whole being, Death. Death will then come about to bring forth the end of the world, bringing salvation. And it's said that the one who brings about this catastrophe will rule over the new world as king. Ikutsuki believes he is that king. I think it was right about here where I mentally checked out of the story and stopped caring. The main antagonists of this game are just absolutely terrible. Sure, it makes sense to manipulate a bunch of high school kids who don't know any better into accomplishing a goal that you otherwise can't accomplish yourself. Sure, whatever. It's the fact that once Ikutsuki reveals himself to be a villain, he basically goes insane. Like, all the integrity and character they previously were just completely evaporates and a new one takes their spot. Even though I knew this twist was coming because the number of people with apathy syndrome wasn't decreasing, it just doesn't hit because someone decided to make him an insane person and have him make 0 sense. Have fun ruling over nothing after you destroy the world. After Seize proclaims to stop Ikutsuki, he has Aegis attack the group and crucifies them? Once you wake up, Ikutsuki and Aegis have captured Mitsuru's father and are about to sacrifice him. But Aegis wavers, leading Ikutsuki to draw his own gun to shoot him instead. Mitsuru's father, who still had his own gun because the now insane Ikutsuki didn't check to see if he had one, quickly draws his own gun, making them both shoot each other. Mitsuru's father immediately dies and Ikutsuki then orders Aegis to kill you and your group. As a quick side note, I do really like this cutscene and its use of camera angles. After Aegis frees your group, Ikutsuki forgets that he has a gun and walks off the edge, likely by accident. And that puts an end to what may be the worst segments Persona 3 Reload has to offer. That scene further demonstrates my point on why I wish the story was reworked from the original. A couple days later, the 3rd transfer student is introduced to your class, Ryoji Mochizuki. You are the first and Aegis is the 2nd transfer student, by the way. It's abundantly clear that he takes special interest in the player character. He's the average transfer student that the other female students fawn over, but something's definitely off about him. Your first clue is that after you hang out with him, you don't progress a social link but are instead given HP or SP bonuses. Your second clue is a little more subtle. As you get to know him a little more, he's confronted by a group of students who want him to stop talking to their girlfriends. But instead of accepting their request or even bullying them, he's just confused and genuinely doesn't understand why they would want him to stop socializing with their girlfriends. I dig this clue a lot in hindsight. Aegis also declares Ryoji as a threat but doesn't elaborate why. That isn't really a clue, but it's worth noting going forward. I won't point them out, but there are 2 more clues, both of which you've already been exposed to. I'll give you some time to guess.
Alright, you can all chat later. You're blocking the hallway. Girls, your rooms are that way. Go on and get yourselves unpacked.
You heard her.
We'll see you later then.
Yeah, we'll see you later, dude.
Yes, I shall see you later, Yukari-san. Okay, enough of this. Aigis, you're with us. Junpei, guy's room.
Man.
A couple weeks go by when during the dark hour, Aigis and Ryoji meet on a bridge and have a confrontation where Ryoji's true identity is revealed by Aigis, who conveniently remembers at this very moment. As Aigis attacks Ryoji, he also so conveniently remembers their last encounter 10 years ago. I'll go ahead and let the following cutscene speak for itself.
Yes, 10 years ago, on the night when I was born, I stood on this very bridge. I am the bearer of the 13th Arcana. Everyone knew me as Death. But when I came into being, a part of my power was broken off and scattered. I wasn't at my full strength back then. I was incomplete.
Even so, your power was still far too great. Since I was unable to defeat you, my only option was to seal you away. However, under the circumstances, there was only one suitable vessel. A human boy who had the misfortune of being nearby. I had no other choice.
Now I see. I was inside of him all this time. And I unwittingly led him to discover my 12 missing pieces. And then... I get it. I understand now. I remember everything. I know exactly who and what I am.
Palladium!
Don't be foolish, I guess. You can't win. I'm even stronger than before.
The machine is created to serve a specific purpose. I will destroy you. That is my only reason for existing!
It doesn't have to be that way, I guess.
Sorry.
Aigis fails to apprehend Ryoji. Sees, noticing that Aigis is missing from the dorm during the dark hour, manages to locate her on the bridge. Ryoji is still there and explains to the group what he is and says he's essentially no different from the shadows they've been facing up until now, and that the prophecy Ukutsuki carried out will come to fruition. He calls himself the Appriser. Put simply, he's a shadow that will wake up and then fuse with Nyx, the mother of shadows, and have her descend upon the world and take everyone's will to live, giving everyone apathy syndrome, bringing about the end of the world. Because he has a human form, likely from being trapped inside the player character for so long, he gives the group an out. If they kill him, they'll forget about the dark hour and likely delay Nyx's arrival, but it'll still eventually come all the same. Futile as this seems, he believes this is the better option for the group and that this is merciful. The only other option is to decline this mercy and go out fighting. With it being December 3rd, you and the group are given till New Year's Eve to come to a decision. Every character questions what to do up until this point, and I think it's handled really well. While they all make up their own minds on whatever decision they think is the correct one, they ultimately hand the responsibility of the decision over to you, the team leader. I have mixed feelings on this, however. It feels strange that each character essentially goes, well, there's something I think we should do, but I'll let you decide. Smile. Ordinarily, I'd say this is very true to life, and this does happen when you're with indecisive people, but why in the world would you leave such an important decision to one person? I think it would have been great if each character had their own side quests that acted as loyalty missions, like how Mass Effect 2 has them earlier in the story. Once you completed these hypothetical loyalty missions, Then the group of 9, including the dog, I guess, would then vote on which decision is the better one, and whichever one rules out is the ending you get for your game. Not only would this make more sense realistically, but it adds another level of reward for the player and deepens your connection with the main cast. I get this is more of a casual game though, and that anyone who doesn't realize how important said loyalty missions are would probably be upset to find out that they made the mistake of not doing them so long ago that they can't just reload and do them. It would take too much time and they would likely stop playing instead. 2 compensations for this change would then be to make it abundantly clear earlier on that these missions are important, and or introduce the loyalty missions after you learn about Nyx's arrival so that it's at the forefront of the player's mind since it's relevant to the story. Both of these compensations, however, would probably dilute the reward, making the player less proud than if the missions were introduced earlier on. I hope that makes sense. But it's not that way. The decision solely lies with you, the player, and I chose to spare Ryoji and prepare for the final battle. This essentially serves as one of those choose your ending screens that people tend to really hate, with the bad ending being to kill Ryoji and the good ending being to spare him. I've always been okay with this approach to stories with different endings for some reason. Creating what I'll call dynamic endings based on the choices the player made throughout the game must be an extremely difficult thing to accomplish well, let alone accomplishing it at all. Off the top of my head, BioWare's Mass Effect 1 and 2 and CD Projekt Red's Witcher trilogy are the only 2 series I've played that manage that, and those studios tend to focus on creating great stories as opposed to great gameplay. Hi, I spoiled something related to Mass Effect 3's ending here, so if you don't want to see that, I recommend muting the clip for a little while. I don't actually show anything that's related to the ending though, so as soon as it fades or goes to black or whatever to the next clip, then you can unmute, and that's when I stop talking about it. Gonna give you guys a couple more seconds to mute the video. Hope you're doing well. Enjoy the rest of the video. Mass Effect 3 has a choose your ending sequence, and anyone that's played all the games knows how saddening that is. But it's different there because BioWare amassed a reputation for seemingly making games around a story instead of a story around a game. But I'm getting off track. I of course chose to spare Ryoji. Disappointed as he is with your answer, he ultimately accepts it and wants to say goodbye to you for the last time, while still in his human form. To be honest, I like Ryoji. I think he's a decently well-written character and didn't mind whenever he was on screen, even though I had a very good guess as to who he was to begin with. It's also great that whenever he remembers that he's the Appriser, he doesn't go insane just like Akutsuki did, and now Takaya is. He's more sad about it than anything else, and I shouldn't undersell how genuinely happy that made me. This all the more proves to me that Atlus knows how to write a good character when they want to, and once again, pray that they learn from this and implement more characters like this in future games. Anywho, to fight Nyx you have to climb to the top of Tartarus on January 31st, leaving you another month to prepare and wrap up any side-related thing you wanted to do. I spent this time trying to acquire all the special fusion personas I could. Which, by the way, I don't like how this menu in the Velvet Room is set up. I won't sugarcoat it, this section will be a little confusing. When making a persona, it'll give you a list of other, lesser personas needed to fuse them together to create the one that you want. Simple enough, right? But it won't tell you how to acquire said personas if you don't already have them registered. To get the one you need, you'll have to perform a Dryad infusion, but good luck on finding out how to infuse them. Obviously, what I, and I think most people did, is just Google what other lesser personas are needed in order to make the one that you want. But I really hate having to do that for a game, especially when the game has a feature that could fix this easily but I think is just poorly implemented. The fusion search. What should be a godsend for this problem turns out to be a sobering smack in the face when you realize it will only list infusions with the personas you currently have equipped, instead of the ginormous pool of personas you've registered instead. While I was making these special personas, I kept flipping in and out of this menu thinking I was missing something, and maybe I still am because it seems this is exactly what the menu was intended to do, but I could never figure it out, and I'm sorry if I'm totally wrong and just made an ass of myself ranting like someone complaining they don't like first-person shooters when that's all they play. Before we reach the story's climax, I also think it's worth mentioning that I was able to complete all but 3 social links, those being Kisuke, the fortune link, Akinari the Sun, and Fuka the Priestess. For Fuka, it was because I actually just could never find her card on the map or at school, so I could never start it. I found Akinari sort of late into the game, and since he's only available during days off from school in the afternoon, I was unable to finish his quest. And I forgot about Kisuke. I would see his card in the art room and would always forget to start the social link because I had something else I wanted to do that day, so he just fell by the wayside. In my next Persona playthrough, I'll start as many as I can in order to fill out both my days and nights, since most of the time I would get a Wakatsu during the night because I had nothing to do. Maybe those last two would have fixed that problem. On January 31st, C's will have to enter Tartarus to reach the topmost floor to have your confrontation with Nyx, with the promise that no matter what happens that everyone will meet up on the school rooftop on graduation day. It's business as usual until you come across Takaya. Even this last fight was grating. When it was over, I was so happy to finally put this character behind me. Nyx awaits you at the top, and this fight is a little interesting. You have to defeat the boss multiple times, and it cycles through all 13 major arcanas that you defeated earlier on, not including the last arcana, Death. This fight takes a while. After you've gotten through that, Nyx ascends into the sky and pulls the moon down to the earth as a way to cleanse the earth or whatever. Your group is paralyzed when suddenly you're in the Velvet Room with Igor. Igor is essentially just your Persona sponsor, telling you to reach further and grasp your true potential. I haven't brought up Igor till now because while this is the one and only time I'll mention him in this video, this won't be the last time I'll be speaking about him. I know very little about him right now other than the fact that he will appear in the other games. Igor goes on to remind you how your social links will determine your potential, and that everyone you've had an effect on is thinking of you and cheering you on. You're then granted a new power, the universe.
Our contract has been fulfilled. I have completed my role as well. You were truly a most remarkable guest.
Once this power is granted, you alone are able to follow Nyx up into the moon. Your friends cheer you on, and the power of friendship surges through you as you slowly attack Death. I think it actually makes sense that it strips control away from the player here, and forces you to make certain moves, yet I still wonder if it would have been better as a cinematic instead. Everyone has chimed in and your HP is fully restored, and you can activate your only move, Great Seal, costing you all of your HP. What follows is all of C's being suspended in space, screaming out for you. You're able to tell them you're okay, then another voice, most likely Ryoji, explains that peace will return to Earth and that everything is going to return back to normal. Upon your return, you're met with an emotional embrace. 1 month passes. Junpei and Yukari meet up with you at school, and along with telling you that you don't look so good, it's become apparent that everyone in C's, with the exception of Ayas, maybe because she's a robot, has forgotten about your adventures during the Dark Hour and Tartarus. In usual fashion, everyone can remember but still feel like they're forgetting something very important. After school, you get to have one last interaction with all of C's and your social links as they give you a clue about what they'll be up to and their ambitions, with some of them saying you look sick or exhausted. At the end of the day, you'll arrive at the dorm and immediately fall asleep. The next morning is graduation day and Aigis will be at your door. She explains that she remembers everything whereas no one else seems to, and requests that you and her go to the rooftop as planned and wait to see if the other members arrive. As Mitsuru gives her valedictorian speech, she realizes that what's in the script is actually wrong. This lets her and everyone else remember everything. The gang gather and leave the auditorium. What follows is easily this game's most beautiful moment.
The wind. It feels so nice. I admit, I'm finally noticing the beauty of spring. It's wonderful. And yet, without exception, each and every season will come to an end.
The use of color is gorgeous, and I love how the beginning of the scene just lets you breathe. It's fantastic, and the music, fresh in my mind, already feels incredibly nostalgic. My only gripe is that this scene would have hit harder if I romanced Aigis. I was also going to say that the game should just let whoever you romanced be the person you lay on here, but not everyone you can romance is a part of C's, so I can see why they didn't do that. Also, now that I'm thinking about it and reading the script out loud, chances are that Aigis has some plot armor or something. To be clear, the player character is about to die. Using the Great Seal cost him his life, since the ability cost him all of his HP. As Aigis reminisces all that she's learned, insisting that she wants to be at your side forever, the game lets you pick dialogue options during a cinematic for the first time. Maybe it's due to surprise alone, but this made the scene hit just a little bit harder. I hope that the future games use this throughout each game's runtime instead of saving it for the very end, because that would definitely beat out the 2D animated cinematics. You grow more and more tired as you fight off the urge to rest. Funny as it is, I couldn't help but really relate to the player character here. After a long journey that I wish had been shorter and more tightly put together, I strangely found myself not wanting things to end just yet. But all things must come to an end. The player character shuts their eyes and credits roll to what I found to be a surprising but welcome, bittersweet ending.
It'll be okay. I'm right by your side, here to protect you forevermore.
And that's a very appropriate way of concluding my overall thoughts on the game as well. Going into this, I was excited. I expected the best of the best from Atlus, and while I think I saw some of what they had to offer when it came to music, softer moments, and occasional visuals, it left me wanting a lot more. There are, at this time, 2 more Persona games I genuinely look forward to playing. I love going through a studio's catalog since I can often piece together what they learned going from one game to another. And that's what I intend on doing for this channel in the future, whether it be Bungie, Rockstar, CD Projekt Red, or some other one-off studio about a game or topic I think deserves attention. I hope you look forward to seeing more from me in the future and that you enjoyed what I had to say, even if it's not what you wanted to hear. Thank you for watching. Here's to more second monitor type content in the future. Hi. This is post-editing me from the future to let you know I hate this video. I really do. I hate the way I wrote it. I hate the way especially I recorded it, and the way I recorded it, like the gameplay footage was just terrible. I would record for like 3-hour bursts and then would have to find little clips, like 5-second clips or 10-second clips or segments that I would use for the video, and having to scrub through hours upon hours of footage was just awful. I really wish I knew what I was doing before, but I just wanted to get this video out because I figured that, hey, if it's out, then I can learn from my mistakes and I can just move forward and hopefully pick myself up and do way better on the next one. And I don't really know what my next video is going to be yet. I kind of am bouncing between a couple different things. It might be something completely new that I haven't tried. Maybe that would be good. I really have no idea. I hope you enjoyed what you saw. I definitely didn't. I'm probably going to post this video on YouTube and kind of scrub my mind and try to forget that it exists, even though I'll eventually have to make videos for Persona 4 and 5 and Persona 6 when that comes out in like a decade or something. But yeah, in summary, I know this video sucks. I'll do my best to make sure the next one is at least a little more watchable. Thank you very much for watching though. Peace.